Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Roy, for 30 minutes.
I thank the Speaker. As I come here to the floor tonight, we all recognize that today is September 11th, a date that will never sound the same, a date that now means something totally different than it did prior to 2001. We've seen the continued recognition of those lives lost. We saw it in New York today. We saw it in Pennsylvania. We saw it at the Pentagon. We saw the flag unfurled. I'd like to give a special recognition to my good friend, Senator Brian Birdwell, state senator from the state of Texas, who's a dear friend. And Senator Birdwell was perhaps the individual closest to where the airplane hit the Pentagon in 2001 and survived. Senator Birdwell was burned across every part of his body. He was hauled out, taken to the hospital. He didn't think he was going to make it. Was praying, assuming that he was leaving, was saying goodbye to his family. He survived. He's a great patriot. And if you have a chance to look up his video called "I Am Second" by Senator Brian Birdwell telling the story, it's about 7 to 10 minutes, I think, and it is well worth your time. It is a testament to his faith. It is a testament to his patriotism. It is a testament to all those who went through those terrible attacks that day. And those of us who remember them, we remember them personally and closely. We had friends who were affected. And it reminds us, of course, of what happens when you leave your country wide open for attack. We look back at September 11th and we tend to get wrapped up into the horrors of the collapsing buildings and the horrors of a plane flying into the Pentagon. But we don't spend a whole lot of time talking about the fact that the individuals who carried out that attack overstayed visas to stay in our country because of our very broken system of border security. And yes, border security I use broadly to include those individuals who we permit to come into our country, that are released into our country on a visa or for some other way, and they're in our country and then carry out harm. So we remember every year the almost 3,000 Americans who died in that southern part of Manhattan, or in a field in Pennsylvania, or in Arlington, Virginia. But where was the recognition today for the 75,000 Americans who died from fentanyl last year alone? 25 times the number of people who died on September 11th. Where is the recognition of the thousands of Americans who have been targeted by criminals released onto the streets of our country? Just yesterday, here in this complex, we had in the House Judiciary Committee the mothers of 3 Americans killed as a direct consequence of Vice President Kamala Harris, President Joe Biden, Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, their coordinated effort, their conspiracy to ignore the laws of the United States and put dangerous individuals on our streets that result in the death of Americans. In real time, as we speak, Alexis Nungare, a 27-year-old young Texas woman who chose life 12 years ago when her daughter was born. Her daughter, Jocelyn, who was murdered. She was bound, raped, gagged, had her body thrown into a creek in Texas, outside of Houston, by 2 Venezuelan men who were released into our country in direct violation of our laws under parole on purpose. Rachel Marin, murdered in Maryland. Her mother testified yesterday. Kayla Hamilton. We've had other stories like Lake and Riley. But there are dozens, there are hundreds. There are so many stories that I had my office produce a report that we put out last week entitled America Invaded. And in that report, if you look at what is listed, you will find 2 full pages of 54 examples of Americans, headline stories, who have been killed, raped, assaulted. All of these, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. Where's the commemoration for those Americans? Because in the wake of September 11th, what did we do in all of our infinite wisdom? We created a 250,000 person bureaucracy at the Department of Homeland Security. We didn't used to have this massive bureaucracy, now we do. Has that made us any safer or more secure? If you're watching this as an American, do you feel more secure? If you're an American in Springfield, Ohio, do you feel more secure with 20,000 Haitians who have been dumped into your community? Do you feel more secure if you're in Buffalo, New York, and just 2 weeks ago, a man was apprehended finally by ICE after having been released into Texas from Peru, and we now know that he's wanted for 23 murders in Peru. We released him into the United States. Every one of these examples I'm talking about were specifically the result of having individuals released into the United States from other countries who then carried out a vicious attack, a vicious crime, a vicious murder. We had a witness yesterday who testified to the rape and murder of a beautiful little 11-year-old girl. I think her name is Maria Gonzalez. And if not, I will correct that record, but I believe that is her name. And she was killed again by someone who was released here into the United States and then preyed on her. Where's the commemoration? I'm going to be very blunt. I appreciate that we commemorate September 11th every September 11th. That is a good thing to do. I've heard the bell now ringing for these 23 years. Who's ringing the bell for Jocelyn Nungare? It's a serious question. Kamala Harris was up where the World Trade Center once stood. So were a bunch of other people, including former President Trump, current President Biden, former Mayor Bloomberg. Who is commemorating Jocelyn? Will they be there next June? I think it was June, for the anniversary of her mother's pain when she woke up on Monday morning and her daughter wasn't in the house and she ran down to the convenience store where there were police sirens and tape to find out that her little girl had been murdered? Who's commemorating that? Who's paying attention to that? Because she's a devastated young mother. And like September 11th, where we failed, where we allowed visa overstays to stay in this country and then grab planes and fly into buildings, Jocelyn Nungare is dead today because of Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and radical progressive Democrats who don't give a whit about whether your streets are safe, America. Wake up. And wake up and know what the elections are about. Wake up and know what's happening in your country, because your leaders in this country are failing you. Worse than failing you, they are purposefully endangering you. There's no other way to put it. And I'm tired of listening to this garbage. Come up here to Washington, they say, oh, why can't you just sit here and get along and go across the other side of the aisle and shake hands and say, why can't you guys just come together to solve problems? I'll tell you why. And I've done bipartisan bills. I've got them right now. And I've got friends on the other side of the aisle. But my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, almost to a man and a woman, don't give a damn about the borders being wide open. Because if they did, they would do something about it. That's the truth. And we should start acting like that's the truth. We should stop pretending that we don't have such a wide gulf between that side of the aisle and this side of the aisle. We have a choice right now. What worldview are you choosing for your kids and your grandkids? And again, continued tough love for my colleagues on this side of the aisle. For decades, we have been complicit by allowing the Chamber of Commerce to use cheap labor as their excuse for wide open borders, which set the stage for what we're dealing with right now. Well, those days are over. When all of the corporate whores around this town come begging for their tax breaks, I want them to come explain to the American people why we should do it when their boardrooms are chock full of radical progressive Democrats and liberals who want ESG and want their quarterly reports to do well so their stock portfolios grow, and they come in here begging for tax cuts so they can get richer while America gets screwed. Because if you're living in Springfield, Ohio right now, you don't give a damn about what the guys in the corporate boardroom over in New York City and Manhattan, or maybe in the tall buildings in Cleveland. You don't care about how rich they're getting, but you care that there's now 20,000 Haitian migrants sitting in your community that your granddads and your grandmoms and your moms and your dads worked hard to build, and it now is being trashed. And I can promise you, if you're like those young women who are testifying at the Judiciary Committee yesterday, who are migrants themselves, young woman talking about her dad who came here from Mexico and fought and worked hard and didn't take government handouts, said he was going to do it the right way, said the American dream wasn't about being given something from government. And then he had to sit here and watch his granddaughter get murdered because my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, every single one of them owns it. Every single one of them should march their happy rear ends down to Texas and beg for forgiveness. Beg for forgiveness from Alexis Nungare and Alexis Nungare's father. Because Jocelyn Nungare got raped, bound, gagged, murdered by the people released by Democrats in the White House. Let's not pretend that there isn't a mile of difference between Republicans and conservatives and Democrats and radical progressives. There is a mile of difference. I'm not going to sit here and pretend. Let's all get in a room and talk to each other nicely, pat each other on the back and say, oh man, can't we just have these halcyon days of old, have a beer like Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan? Not if you don't believe in America. Not if you don't believe in sovereignty. Not if you don't believe in the rule of law. Not if you believe it's okay to release 5.5 million people into our country, utterly disregarding how many criminals you're releasing and allowing Americans to get slaughtered. Why don't you get in the car, drive up here to Aberdeen, Maryland, and talk to Kayla Hamilton or Rachel Marin's family? Why don't you beg for forgiveness? Get on your knees in the House chamber and say, I'm sorry that I was so focused on my own political well-being that I would endanger the American people, because that's what you're doing. Finally, my colleagues on this side of the aisle in getting H.R. 2 passed has finally forsaken the Chamber of Commerce's death grip on the Republican Party, saying we need our cheap labor. But we haven't even scratched the surface. We haven't even begun to do what is necessary to take our country back. Because when President Trump talks about mass deportations, he means it, and I mean it, and I hope to hell Republicans on this side of the aisle mean it. Because 5.5 million people dumped into the United States without vetting, without knowledge of who the hell they are. We have the House Judiciary Committee recognizing 99 people on the terrorist watch list released into the United States. 35,000 Chinese nationals this year, and the year's not even over. Who are these people? I flew out to Aurora, Colorado last week. I went to the apartment complex area, met with the people that were there, talked to one of the residents of the building, talked to the tenant who put the camera on her door. She's not lying. Yet we have Colorado Democrats who are trying to say it's a lie that Venezuelan gangs are running those apartment complexes. They get out on Twitter and they say, not true. It's a figment of their imagination. That's why I flew to Aurora, talked to the woman. And she walked through the fact that the manager of the apartment complex isn't there anymore. The manager of the apartment complex left and fled and feared for his life. For 2 months, there was no manager there. They put the cameras up. The cameras then showed what the entire world has now seen, which is armed thugs running around the apartment complex. We're told they smashed doors down, changed the locks on the building. We had a businessman who was there who helped the woman move out and said he basically stepped into the third world for a number of hours while he was helping moving her out. This is coming to every street in America. Wake up. We play up here playing tiddlywinks talking about CRs and nobody knows what the hell those even are. Like, we go around talking about all these different things. We can, let's get together and pass a resolution and a messaging thing this week. What are we going to do to finally just say no? You don't have to take this, We're supposed to be a free people. We're supposedly endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We established this government in the very preamble of the Constitution. What does it say? It lays out the purpose of the government being to secure the blessings of liberty. It's not to give crap away. As I've said before on the House floor, we're not supposed to be the United States House of free stuff. We're not the United States Congress here to give you a check. We're killing the American dream. Congress, the administration, are actively killing the American dream in real time. We vote on another bill for another program that spends more money that we don't have. We rack up more debt. We increase the interest. And at no point are we actually securing the country. We've been at war for a quarter century in some form or fashion. I don't even know how many trillions. 8? 9? I've lost count on how many trillions we've spent engaged in conflict. Directly in Iraq and Afghanistan, only to tuck tail and run when Biden and the current brass bailed and left those 13 heroes stranded to die. How many trillions? How many American men and women were injured, lost their legs, lost an eye, PTSD? 80,000, 100,000? More with PTSD? How many suicides a day? We've been at war for a quarter of a century. In this town, we can't ever fight for you, the American people, to actually secure you with a secure border, with secure communities, and with an economy that isn't blown to hell by irresponsible government spending. And you want to know why? In the false name of defense, in the false name of securing this country, because the defense world tells me every year, if I don't vote for one of these bloated spending bills, we won't get a new submarine. We won't get a new carrier. What the hell are we trying to defend? What is left of the United States to defend? A school where I can't send my child to pray to God without spending $20,000 a year on top of the taxes I pay? A school that my friend sends her sixth grader to with a trans music teacher asking her kid to do some dance in class? Yes, true story. Is that what we're defending with carriers and missiles and endless wars? Are we defending a country where Jocelyn Nungare gets raped and murdered? Or Rachel Marin gets raped and murdered because we release migrants into the streets of America? Dangerous people? There have been multiple since I literally released this report last week. Almost 50-page report, or 40-page report. Put it out last week. I can't even keep up with the news stories since we put it out. In Virginia, just 30 miles from here, a teenage girl was abducted by a Peruvian illegal immigrant, arrested, who had been released into the interior by this administration. A Palestinian migrant accused of beating a Jewish New York man, released into America because he claimed he wouldn't be safe. We had two of the people in Aurora, Colorado, where I said I went to, that were apprehended by ICE after they'd been released into the country, arrested, released on bond because we can't detain them because our entire policies have been turned on their head. We sit here in September and we have this grand debate about whether we're going to do a continuing resolution for 75 days or 6 months or a year. Will we include the SAVE Act to ensure that American citizens vote? Heaven forbid that we stand up and say only American citizens should vote in American elections. It's an 80% issue. We have legislation that would fix it. We had a hearing yesterday in which secretaries of state, experts on the matter, all acknowledged you need the law to guarantee that only American citizens vote in American elections. So now we're having a debate about that. What can we put forward on the floor? With all due respect, some of my conservative colleagues, they gag on a gnat. I can't support a CR because 12 appropriations bills must be passed. Okay. 5 have been passed. Now what? We actually have to figure out how to proceed. I think maybe we could just fund government for a few months and try to make sure elections are secure. Or let's pick a different fight. But why don't we actually stand up and do something to make this country better? And if we do get a CR to December, and if Republicans do win the elections in November, what the hell are we going to do with it? Will we fight? I'd like to go to the American people over the next 60 days and say, yes, we're going to fight, and you can believe us this time. That Republicans will be bold enough to do what our Democratic colleagues have done repeated times in the last 2 decades, which is risk your precious. Risk your election certificate. Stop starting off every Congress saying, well, if we do this, we risk our majority makers. What good is it to be in Congress if you don't do something with your election certificate and then go sell it to the people you represent as being the right thing to do? I've been in tight districts. I've done that. Every single constituent that I represent are fed up. They're fed up with a country that they no longer recognize. They love their country, but the government that they have entrusted to maintain that country that their fathers and grandfathers fought, bled, and died for has been turned into something they no longer recognize. I am glad that we have people today on September 11th commemorating those lost. I am glad that we show patriotism. I am glad that we put the flag on the Pentagon. But until we recognize that every single day, because of our policies in this chamber and in the other chamber and at the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue, Americans are suffering with high inflation, with houses that they can't afford, and with their own people getting murdered and slaughtered on the streets or in their homes. I cannot imagine just 2 months ago, Alexis Nungare waking up and her 12-year-old daughter not being in the house, only to find out she's dead after having been raped while she was sitting there sleeping, while the mom was sleeping in the house. All because Kamala Harris and all of her cronies in the administration chose and still choose, as I speak, to release dangerous individuals on the streets of our country. I'm sure I'm going to get some sort of admonition for directing some of my venom to the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue. But the fact is, the leaders of this country need to be warned. We better get busy fixing this country, or the American people are not going to take it anymore. And I will be right there supporting them. I am sick and tired of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle not showing up, not doing what we said we would do. And I am particularly sick of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle daring to lie to the American people that they somehow believe in securing the border when they put forward legislation that would have codified the very parole policies that have, since they even introduced the dang bill, been used to slaughter and kill innocent American citizens. This is not a negotiation. You don't negotiate for your safety and your security. You just get busy doing it. And I can promise you that whatever happens with this election, I'm going to be a loud voice for the state of Texas to stick their middle finger up at this godforsaken city and say, we're going to secure our state. All of the other people in all of the other states be damned. Because we have an obligation to do it when our people are dying and our people are hurting and we're spending $13 billion of our own money. Where the hell is this Congress and this Senate backing up the people of Texas? When we joined this union, we were promised something, and we're being denied it. And on behalf of every single one of those moms that come to my office in tears because their kids died from fentanyl or because their little girl was raped and murdered, and for every one of those tombstones I drive by in Arlington coming to office every day, who either gave or risked the last full measure of devotion, they didn't do it for this. They didn't risk it for this. They risked it to live free and secure and have opportunity in a country that matters, that is sovereign, and that is safe. It is time for us to do our job, and it is time for the American people to do their job this fall and make sure that the right leaders are running this country. With that, I yield back, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Under the